I believe with new tools that are intuitive and easy to approach, the more you're in the tool, ideally, the more comfortable you get with it, and it just becomes part of your daily life. In fact, you want to be in that environment. It's like that's the place you want to be working in. So that's the vision: is that it shouldn't be cumbersome or complicated.
This series of episodes was recorded live at Digital Construction Week 2025 at the Excel in London. I got the privilege of interviewing some amazing people that are shaping the future of the built environment through the technology that organizations are developing and delivering now and for the future. Although this podcast was worth the entry fee alone, let's admit it, now is the time to register your interest for next year's Digital Construction Week 2026. But if, like me, you can't wait until next year, check out Digital Construction North on the 19th of November. The links to both events, as always, are in the show notes. But just before we go live with this week's episode, here's a brief intro to the topic we cover and today's guest. Digital tools often promise faster decisions, smoother collaboration, and greater clarity across construction projects. But the real work often begins after the software is switched on. Yet the adoption of such digital tools isn't just a technical challenge, it's a behavioural one. On this podcast, we're yet to explore the reality of digital transformation on the ground. Not from the perspective of dashboards or features, but from the vantage point of the people using them. It's about time we had a conversation about people, not platforms, and the often overlooked human factors that make or break construction technology with someone who knows their behaviours from their bytes. Greg Demchak is a seasoned leader in architecture, engineering, and construction technology, AEC, recently appointed as Vice President of Industry and Market Development at Motif Systems, where he aims to bridge the gap between innovative technology and practical application, ensuring that Motif's next generation AI-powered solutions are aligned with the evolving need of the design professional. With over 2 decades of experience, Greg has been instrumental in pioneering immersive technologies and real-time collaboration tools that have transformed the AEC landscape. His notable contributions include work on foundational platforms like Autodesk Revit and Synchro 4D, as well as leading digital twin initiatives at Bentley Systems. Educated as an architect, Greg holds a Master's of Science in Architectural Studies from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology.
Greg, welcome to the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. Very excited to be
Too
here.
right. Okay, so live podcasting. I've provided you with an intro, but it's always good to hear it from the horse's mouth, so to speak. So if you'd like to introduce yourself very briefly and tell us what you're doing at Digital Construction Week.
Yeah, sure. So my name's Greg Demchak. Thanks for the introduction. I'm a design technologist. I'm an architect by background.
Okay.
So that's almost 25 years ago, but I've been on this journey to kind of like bring digital tools into the like AEC space for the last 25 years, starting with Revit and moving into Synchro for construction use cases. And now just recently joined Motif and kind of sort of reimagine like that next set of tools for the industry.
Brilliant. Well, let's get into it, shall we?
Let's do it.
Right. Okay. So let's dive straight in. And how is Motif transforming the way AEC teams collaborate, moving away from fragmented communication?
Yeah, so moving away from fragmented technology. So like one of the things we realized, so in this industry, it's unlike other industries where like multi-user collaboration has become kind of standard. It's been slow to get adoption.
Yeah.
I could take that back. I would say probably a lot of firms are using things like maybe Google Docs or even now with like Word or Excel, you've kind of auto save and everything's like working in real time. So we're quite used to, I think we're getting more and more used to like, wow, we can like collaborate on a document or a PowerPoint or Excel, in real time and kind of work in a team space. But most of the main tools for AC weren't engineered to be like that, like where you can have real time collaborations, mostly still like desktop software working with files. And so one thing that Motif, what we wanted to bring to the table is like, well, what's it mean to actually build, a collaboration stack on top of modern technology? So like web enabled, cloud enabled, multi-user, like out of the gate.
Yeah.
And we wanted to do that with straight away with sort of like direct integrations with existing tools. So not be disruptive, but interoperable. So we basically launched version 1 2 months ago. It's a web-based interface, cloud-enabled, multi-user, makes live connections to Revit and Rhino.
Okay.
You can also bring in SketchUp models. You can also bring in images for that matter.
Nice.
And which I think is interesting here with looking back to collaboration, our plugins into Revit and Rhino create a live data stream. So there's no file export, file import. It's just you turn on this button, you click stream in any number of Revit models or Rhino, and these models will stream into our interface, into Motif. And then you could have multiple people. We could all be together running around this model, making comments, doing markups, feeding those comments back to Revit or Rhino in real time. And it's a bit like, it's kind of like Google Docs, but for kind of AEC editing.
For sure.
And, we're kind of starting with consuming and kind of back and forth with existing design tools. But the plan is to really start to enable direct authoring and editing, in a collaborative environment.
Is there, when you're working with clients and implementing this way of working, is it that air of trepidation in that they've worked a certain way and used to saving it not in real time and save and then update and then save? Is that air of, has it saved? I know when I've been using, like you mentioned Word and autosave, and most things are autosave now.
Yeah.
But every now and again, I still go up to that save button and click it,
Hit save as.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. So because it's cloud technology, so it's slightly different. It's similar. If you've ever done that autosave thing and you look in the behind the scenes, you'll see there's a huge history of actually backups happening. So if you ever do get stuck, you can actually go recover that. We have the same approach. Every transaction that happens, there's no save in Motif. Every transaction's happening, but we keep a complete history of all transactions. And in fact, you can go back through that whole history and you can basically rehydrate the model from any point in the history, or you could make a branch or, spin something out. So it's not that there's like an explicit save, but in fact, we do keep a complete record of every transaction and every state.
Yeah.
So it's just a different way of architecting things, from like a file-based system to more like keeping track of almost like states of the database that you can roll back to at any point in time.
Okay.
So,
excellent.
Yeah. As long as you're comfortable with like, it's not like open an old file, it's just roll back to a transaction.
Yeah, for sure. So new way of working, I suppose. How do you support a client when it's not just the tools they need to think very differently about how they're working in collaboration and how Motif is integrated into what they do?
Well, part of it is software just has to be intuitive and easy to use. I actually believe that in some ways, if you build good software that's intuitive and understandable, you shouldn't have to have a expensive support helpline to just get people going.
Yeah.
Of course, we do have, customer support, success engineers who will be there to help kind of like whatever onboard and keep people up and going. But more or less, we think that the software is sort of like click and go and sort of intuitive by nature.
Yeah.
And so we're actually trying to make it so that it shouldn't be hard. So if you're a principal architect or you're a superintendent on a construction site, you're not used to maybe getting into like the complexity of Rhino or Revit, you should be comfortable to go into that tool, find the tool that makes sense and just start working. So when it comes to like sketching on a 3-dimensional surface, we kind of took this opinion that whatever surface is kind of underneath the cursor, well, it just sort of automatically picks that up. And suddenly you're sketching in 3D without a lot of complexity of like finding a button to set the work plane or change the work plane. It should just sort of work. So that's one thing. And I believe with new tools that are intuitive and easy to approach, the more you're in the tool, ideally, the more comfortable you get with it. And it just becomes part of your daily life. In fact, you want to be in that environment. It's like, that's the place you want to be working in. So that's the vision, is that it shouldn't be, cumbersome or complicated to actually, get into this. And I think we actually saw this with other tools in the market, kind of really emerged, I would say, through like, COVID, the pandemic, collaboration, like, collab tools like Miro and Mural and Figma, for example. You kind of go into those tools and it's just like, wow, suddenly I'm just working, I'm like drawing lines, doing sticky notes, like collaborating with people. And I think that's our vision too.
And I suppose if we're talking in 2 or 3 years and you look back, I suppose the idea with clients is they'll be like, how do we ever work without this?
Exactly. Yeah. That's the home run moment, I think, when people just, they can't imagine not working with tools like this. Yeah.
Okay. So sticking on that thread then, when you're working with clients, what does success look like? How do you measure success beyond just usage of the software?
Yeah, well, I mean, usage is a huge indicator, right? And we can now kind of keep track of usage. I mean, if you sell the software, but then there's no usage, something's not working, right? So I mean, I think there's a lot of that can happen in the market these days. But actually, what we want to see is usage. Usage is a great indicator of success, that the tool is being used on a regular daily basis, that specific features in the tool are being used. And that shows that there's real value. When something's being used, then it's delivering value. If something's not being used, it may be delivering no value. And maybe that's an indicator to maybe remove that tool or that feature, or like, maybe it's not necessary. So I think we actually want to deliver tools and features and things that are useful all the time, and then that's because it's delivering actual value. So I think utilization is a good way to kind of measure its the value. No, another way to measure success is, eventually you want to get product evangelists out there in the market. This would be like customers, users who are like super excited about the tool. Like they're willing to go up on the stage, on record, and be like, using this tool, this product has completely changed how we deliver projects today. And we can't be more happy to be on this path, So I think energy, willingness to talk about it, like, excitement.
Almost an evangelist.
And that kind of just that feeling that like, wow, there's all the value, there's time savings and productivity savings, but also at the end, I think you also want, users to really fall in love with your product and have a strong affinity and relationship with it.
So is there a feedback loop then? So, you saying that if people aren't using a certain thing, maybe it's not required, it's not necessary, or there's that people don't necessarily know how to utilize it, but it's so simple what you provide front facing that's probably not the case. So is there a feedback loop where you're updating what you're providing all the time from what your clients are saying?
Yeah. So when we can see utilization, we know how often things are being used. That's kind of comes with cloud technology. But also too, we have like so I think very interesting, like if you look at the founding members of Motif, Amar and Brian, but you also have Matt and Lyra. And so Matt, I think this is very cool. Matt kind of in charge of product management, but Lyra product design. So I think one thing that's very clear at Motif is we really believe in good design. We put design equal to product, like the product and design. And so one of the things that design does is connect with the users, hear the feedback, not just maybe implement directly what the user, says, but also think about it, prototype it, design it, put it in front of the users, get a feedback loop, and then deliver like a great product.
Yeah.
Not just something maybe hacked together. So we take that seriously. Everything that we're designing is coming from direct interviews and feedback with actual users.
So
that goes through a design loop, an iteration loop, and then release. And we want to make those cycles very tight, like high velocity. That's the thing about cloud delivery. We can like be releasing updates very quickly, very rapidly.
So with that speed, you need to make sure you're on the money, that everything works. How do you negate any errors that might come from the velocity, as you put it, of getting things out there quickly?
Yeah, well, that's also cool. So another thing that's happened, and this has really happened quite fast. I mean, we can now leverage behind the scenes, right? So like AI, for code QA, QC checking. We're not necessarily like vibe coding everything, but we'll vibe code prototypes to get ideas very quickly prototyped. And then when it gets to production code, you can actually use AI to help check the code, review the code, this kind of stuff. So I think the nature of software development is totally changing too, because of just the power of things like Cursor and kind of prompt based like coding tools. So that helps a lot. I think that the way the software is developed is totally changing. You might call it like hyper velocity engineering is one phrase. Like AI, using AI to help deliver code faster and better. And there's just traditional stuff. Like we still have QA. It's like kick the tires, try it out, push the button, make sure this thing is not, falling over. So,
I mean, humans are going to use it at the end of the day. So
exactly.
who better to test it than a human?
Yeah.
Just sticking with this then, has there been any false assumptions or surprising realizations that you've seen when onboarding, developing, getting feedback from your clients that you thought, I didn't know that, or that's really interesting because we weren't going down that path?
Well, I think what happened with actually one false assumption that we realized quite early on, if you think about a lot of like the BIM sort of model viewers out there, like a collaboration viewer, it tended to go down two separate paths. One might be review the sheets and the documents in like a 2D environment. So just markup sheets in 2D. And then you have this other path, which is like 3D models are here. And you do like clash detection there. So it's almost like these two worlds of like sheets over here and like clash detection over here. And I think what the team realized is this assumption that those have to be separate. Is that a right assumption? And we could sort of, what would it mean to actually bring those two worlds into one kind of infinite canvas space? So that's what we've been experimenting with. You can bring in all the sheets, for example, of Revit, lay them out and do your markup and commenting, but then you could also have the 3D model pop into a board, and you can do kind of like markups on 3D and 2D. So I think there's an assumption that those worlds have to be separate. And then I think what this opens up the door for in terms of user experience and in the workflow, and in some ways Revit had this too, the ability to work in a both traditional two-dimensional space, like a sheet, but to sort of activate or drill into like the 3D model and then have full interaction in 3D and then almost like, portal back out.
Yeah.
So I think there's some really cool ideas here that you could be in like a paper space, 2D, and then activate into a 3D and be orbiting and then sort of resurface. And, this could apply to many, many different types of data, right? Not just 2D and 3D, but like, what about if you had a portal into Google Maps or a portal into Google 3D tiles, and now you have interaction at a map layer that could then freeze and you could pop back out, or the detail. You could be looking at detail and like start to zoom into like more and more of the construction detail,
hyper detail,
and kind of almost like this kind of infinite linking of information. I think that becomes really really interesting. I was thinking another assumption was, people thought, oh my God, like Motif, it's going to come out like straight away and somehow like replace BIM and Revit in the first instance. The market maybe had this sense, but that you could actually start with collaboration first and start building that platform, and then progressively, add more and more features that starts to get into like authoring and model making.
So you mentioned using AI internally to look at code and using it for speed. Looking to the future, then I think AI has come up in all the conversations I've had. Are you using AI in Motif for clients, and is that the way it's going, and you're testing and developing that? Is there anything in the pipeline from that perspective?
Yeah, I think I can talk a bit. I mean, there's a lot in the pipeline. There's a lot of experiments. You have an R&D team that's 100% focused on ML and AI. The first thing that we're probably going to come out with, which is kind of low-hanging fruit, but it makes sense, is because we can bring in a live stream from Revit and Rhino, we can bring images. We can prompt into any of those views and do like an image, like AI image gen upscaling or rendering right there on it. So prompt it to look like a watercolor sketch, and it will kind of do that, but retain the geometry, because we can kind of go into the geometry for the edge detection. So that's kind of an obvious one. Other things would be more like, experiment, like, we can hand sketch like a construction detail. So kind of going down to like the hand sketch as like as an input, and then prompt like, go find me similar details that look like this from my history. And it could then surface details that resemble that. So that's some machine learning to kind of understand how sketch lines could then resolve into like patterns that look like actual construction details. Stuff like that is pretty interesting. And of course, LLM stuff is also powerful as well, where you could just like bring in a planning document and, query that thing and ask maybe questions about the model, the BIM model relationship to like, like zoning or planning restrictions, and then maybe like highlight areas of the model that maybe are non-compliant or
super powerful. Like that could save so much time and so many errors further down the line. That you might not necessarily know about, new changes in regulations and things like that. And I suppose you should be up to speed if you're in that genre, but still having that as your prompt and being able to do that almost real time, while you're designing is really cool.
And we want really, I mean, this is not in the current product, but it's coming, right? It's this kind of multimodal concept, and that traditional systems like maybe Revit or Rhino, it's all about geometry, right? And there's metadata there too. But often it really lacks all the other types of media that go into a project, all the conversations, all the Word documents, all the maybe planning and zoning restrictions, the specifications. Like we believe that really, when you think about this more holistically, all of that content is really part of the process. So we don't want to just leave with just another 3D parametric modeler, but really a system, a platform that can handle all that range of content. And then when it comes to machine learning AI, have the ability to kind of have those kind of like real time, like, prompt natural language interactions with the system, whether it's pulling text from a planning document that could be, again, like this portal idea, living as a link somewhere, not necessarily like a direct import, or, querying the BIM model.
Okay, cool. So, Greg, I always finish on this question. And it's heavily linked to what we've just been talking about there and looking at the future. 10th anniversary of Digital Construction Week this year. What do the next 10 years look like, or what are we going to be talking about in 10 years' time in terms of digital construction?
Well, I think 10 years, if you think about the rate, well, it's hard because like construction's always been a laggard, I feel like. But if you look at the rate of change the last couple of years, just in the AI machine learning space, model context protocols, all this type of stuff, and you look at the velocity of change there.
Yeah.
If you apply that to construction, 10 years from now, it's totally conceivable that you could be having conversations like we're having right now with experts, with engineers, architects, contractors, supply chain, and through the conversation itself, as input, capturing the intention, the design could start to emerge and sort of like react in real time as we're talking through it. And in fact, start making variations and then we could then react to it in real time. And in fact, be creating instances of these designs that are inherently constructible and probably inherently constructible through like offsite prefabrication, manufacturing. They could be all handled through highly automatic, factory produced robotic systems, right? Componentized architecture, like these Legos, right? So as we're designing and working on a project and the complexity of that, it could already start to maybe be rationalizing how it could be decomposed into like manufacturable components that could be delivered to the site and erected in a totally safe way.
I love that idea that we could be having a conversation.
Yeah.
And as we're having that conversation, something's developing in the background.
And react to it in real time.
Yeah.
And see it right there happening.
Yeah,
and it's
absolutely.
not like hallucinating. It's like, wow, this is like an inherently fabricatable thing. And by the way, in terms of this question about fabricatable, wouldn't it be cool too that we're imagining a new type of architecture that's not just like optimized and boring, but actually incredibly rich, highly detailed, like intrinsically beautiful, because the machining and the robotics and the fabrication pipeline can actually deliver like, high quality at low cost. So what if we can actually get back to like where the architecture that emerges is just like a whole new generation of just incredible high quality precision architecture.
I know it's slightly different for architects, but if you think about all the times where you've had that thought, that imagination, and trying to put that down on paper, it can be quite difficult. It's a huge skill, and even more try and verbalize that.
Yeah.
But if you got something that can understand the nuances in what you're saying and then develop it from there, that's amazing. That is definitely 10 years time.
Imagine that. Talking about it, sketching. We could use these Legos actually. We could probably arrange an idea of a city here with these Legos, and it would start to understand, oh, yeah, that's like a 2-story housing block. And it could maybe go out and fabricate that. I don't know. It's like,
you're talking cityscapes there and smart cities and things like that. Amazing. Fantastic.
Cool.
Greg, it's been great talking to you today. Thank you so much. Really interesting where you're going with these things. It's like simplification to make things more complex, but in a simplified way, if that makes any sense at all.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining me.
Amazing. Thank you.